Peace and blessings, YouTube. It's always an honor and a pleasure to come before you in truth and honesty, always. This evening, I wanted to talk about the way we think, the thoughts, the thought pattern, and not just the upbringing of how we're brought up in society, but what are the effects of negative thinking? What are the effects of wicked thinking? What can it do to our overall well-being, health, and future thinking in a negative way? The worst effect of negative thinking is that it destroys you internally. It makes you sick internally. It actually destroys brain cells when you have concocted your mind and set your mind to thinking in a negative way, and you have accepted that reality or these sick imaginations that we have. That actually destroys you and make you a sick person internally. This is something that has not been put in this proper perspective, because we talk many times about the effects but not the causes. All of this behavior that we see amongst the people starts in the darkness of the womb of the mind, in the way you think, in the way the knowledge that you have or the knowledge that you lack. So the way we think will actually determine our actions and behavior. So we see the effects of the people in the deprivation and depression and the reduced nature of the human being, how we have fallen from such a great place with our Creator. We can ultimately come back to that place, but it takes sacrifice, discipline, and overcoming. But the way you think can actually prolong your deprivation or cut it shorter. So wicked thinking makes you sick. Wicked thinking leads you to greater deprivation and sickness and weaknesses. Righteous thinking purifies. Righteous thinking, and that's the difference. The law and standard has to be set where there's a discernment of righteousness and wickedness, because many people just live the way they want to live. They believe, I have one life to live, I'm going to live it how I want to live. Not that I'm going to live it as righteous as possible, but since I only have one life to live, I'm going to just run it into the ground and live it, have as much fun as possible, live as wicked as possible. But as dependent as we are as human beings on water, sunlight, and the vegetation, we shouldn't think that way, because God can reverse nature and destroy all of human beings. It can happen scientifically, it can happen, and it has happened. So we need to humble ourselves and be a little more careful in the way we think and the way we act. But briefly, I want to just discuss how to train our minds away from wicked thinking. This is something that really does take practice, because in this society in which we live, it is promoted to be lustful, to be materialistic, to be this concocted vessel of miseducation and lies and falsehood. Most people have accepted the lies and the falsehood as their life and as their truth, because this educational system has been set up to lie and to mislead you and misguide you. So most people in this society have been lied to and tricked, and they have held on to the lie, and is why most people are sick. That is the effect. The cause is the lie. The effect is the sickness. So we know what the effects of a lie is, but truth and righteousness purifies. So when we speak of training our minds to think a certain way, you train your mind to think in a righteous manner, then you start to come back to yourself. You start to come back to God's favor. You start to come back to that place within yourself spiritually to start evolving in the correct direction, because wicked thinking actually is a downward spiral in the nature, and it will lower you to the level of an animal, and it's so subtle you don't even realize it. It's just a slow downward spiral. Day by day you just get more deprived of your nature, and you become more animal-like spiritually. And that is what is happening in this society, where human beings have become so full of lust and corrupt to where they just live the life of beasts and animals in human flesh. So for us to come back to righteousness and to continue to elevate with intelligence and knowledge, then we have to submit to righteous thinking. We have to submit to positive thinking. We have to submit to the purification of what actually purifies, which is righteous behavior, righteous code of conduct. That is the standard that needs to be discerned, and that is the standard that needs to be addressed, because there's no righteous yardstick oftentimes presented. You know, There's no righteous yardstick or righteous example, not many righteous examples where we see where we're going wrong and we change our direction. Training our minds it takes practice. When a wicked thought comes to your mind, you have to tune it out. Lustful desires, sexual thoughts, lustful thoughts, wicked thoughts, whatever them thoughts may be, you have to learn how to tune it out and replace those thoughts with positivity and righteousness. This is something you as an individual have to practice. You have to train yourself just like you train your diet, eat a certain way, work out a certain way. You have to train your mind a certain way to where you make sure you're not living wicked and in disobedience to God, because you can't hope you're not living bad or think, because the effects are too serious for me to guess or hope that I'm not living in deviation. I have to make sure that I'm not living in deviation so that I can start to tread a different course away from these wicked examples that we see and how they're fallen and they're miserable and depressed and full of anxiety, grief, unsuccess. If you don't want to end up like that, then you have to pay attention to the example and then decide for yourself, I need to tune out these wicked thoughts. I need to tune out this toxic chemical BS that is being fed to me through the airwaves, through the television, through social media. Tune it all the way out and start to replace those thoughts with righteous thinking. Because to not do so, you're hurting yourself. You're only affecting yourself, making yourself more sick and deprived of what life is really all about. We're not living life miserable every day, waking up depressed, stressed out. That's not the way life is supposed to be lived. That is the lowest, cheapest form of existence. When you live like that, under constant anxiety and grief, you're not experiencing life. You're not living fruitful. You're not living in harmony. You're not in paradise mentally and spiritually. The way to reach that is to first, you have to be purified. That is through God's grace and mercy and permission and his favor amongst that individual. God will bring you back to yourself. But you got to come away from this enemy. You got to come away from being the enemy of yourself. You got to master your own self. We were put here to master creation. But the first thing you have to master is your own nature, your own weaknesses, wickedness, low desires. You have to master that first. Until you master and until we master our own selves and minds, then we can't master anything else around us. We will be vessels of destruction of those around us in the creation if we're not careful and if we're not living in harmony with the creator in the law, in the universe. So we have to start by treading that course of mastering self, mastering your own desires, making sure that your desires are in harmony with truth and righteousness and not perpetuating the lies and falsehood that have been fed to us. We have to understand that we have been lied to. We have been fed complete BS and falsehood. That's the first step. Then the veil starts to come off of your eyes, and then you start to see more and witness more, and then you start making intelligent moves. Okay, I need to move like this. I got to think like this. This was fed to me growing up, so this was complete BS. That is why I'm in this condition. So I come away from this, and then as you continue to challenge yourself and overcome, then your condition will get better. You'll start to just become a more elevated person. This is all by God's permission. So that was the whole idea of this society. It was to trick us and deceive us into falling, into becoming vessels of wickedness and devils. That's what this society was for. That's why we're fed so much carnal, lustful things. You don't see righteousness at all for the most part. Unless you are that embodiment of righteousness, you're not witnessing that in this society. So we have to become the vessels. We have to become that energy of righteousness. And it starts first with your way of thinking. Let's train our minds. Let's train our thoughts to be more positive and more in harmony with truth and righteousness. As painful as truth may be, don't tell lies. Lies destroy. Lies are very, 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 I don't think most people understand how serious telling lies are. That is so destructive. God hates liars, and that destroys your being as well. When you lie, always stand on truth, regardless of the consequences, regardless of how painful it is. Always tell the truth. because the consequences of lies is beyond the person you're telling the lie to. God is actually holding you accountable for that. So we got to understand there's an unseen power holding us accountable for all the stuff we're doing, whether we believe that or not. That's your naivety if you don't understand that, because you're hurting yourself by living wicked and not living righteous, because there is an unseen power keeping track of everything. So let's do ourselves a favor by making our own lives easier by living righteous and telling the truth and living in harmony with God's law. So thank you, YouTube family. It's always an honor and a pleasure. I love to leave you in inspiration and uplift. Let's continue to live righteous and overcome our own weaknesses and low desires and master our thoughts and train our minds to think in a positive, upright manner. Peace and blessings.